Hey, Honest community. Before we dive into this episode, we've got a quick free favour to ask. If you enjoy the Honest Property podcast, please hit like, follow, and subscribe wherever you're listening from. It helps us grow, reach more people, and bring on guests that you want to hear from. Thanks for being a part of this. We appreciate you more than you know.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Honest Property Podcast. We're your hosts, Becky and Bruce. Are the Honest Property Sisters. We've built a multi-million pound property portfolio over the last 12 years, and we love having unfiltered chats about building wealth, purpose, and freedom that actually feels good. And today we're joined by Hannah from Hannah What is Wealth. She pivoted from being a fashion buyer to a financial advisor and now teaches modern women about investing, net worth, and building real wealth. We came across her on Instagram. We were like absolutely gravitated to her vibe. But yeah, before we talk investing, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, happy to be here. I think it's going to be a good chat.
Yeah, we'd love to share more about you. So who are you? Because the jump from fashion to finance is quite a jump. So, who are you before finance?
I started my career in fashion buying. So I kind of worked at head offices, places like Marks and Spencer. I started like my career in Georgia Asda on a placement year and it was like, super fun, loved it. And then I guess on the side, I like my whole kind of origin story of this finance thing was I lost my dad when I was 22 and I inherited a big chunk of money. And I was like, I don't know what people do with money. I'd grown up with a single mom, so I was very good. We were very good at the household at like making money stretch and saving and budgeting, being super frugal. So I had that kind of one experience of money. And then all of a sudden, I was like, I don't know what people do with money. I've never had conversations about growing it, investing. I don't know anything. So I actually started in property and then kind of slowly realized the stock market was actually not this big scary thing that I thought it was, and just learned a lot about the whole thing. I was like reading loads of books, and I think sometimes it can be a bit of an unrelatable problem if you have like money that you don't know what to do with, but it's such a big responsibility, especially when it's like, my dad worked his whole life and didn't get to retire, so that's why I had it, and it was kind of like, well, like what do you do with it? So I was just learning as much as I could. Um, and then I started teaching my friends and like their money started growing and I was like, oh, actually, like this is really unfair. If you're not part of these circles and you don't get to have these conversations, you don't really get to benefit from this kind of thing. And at the same time, kind of like similar time, obviously not giving my whole life timeline, but I ended up teaching yoga in a co-living in Spain and there was like loads of location independent people and lots of people worked in basically like marketing and programming was kind of what you could, this was pre-COVID, so people who had got a remote job then it was like more challenging. I would say it was more of a thing like people who had made this really intentional life decision, and it opened up this whole world for me and I was like, oh my God, I want to be location independent. And fashion buying is, the beauty of it is that you're with the product and you're doing fit sessions and you're like picking the colors and the fabrics, but you have to be in the office a lot. And my career wasn't something that you could do freelance or you could do remotely. So it kind of, I was like, what can I do? And I was like, oh, know loads about money. And I know that women don't know a lot about it. And like lots of people want to learn. So I kind of tentatively like started putting myself out there on the internet, started working with people, like coaching one to one. And then I was like, okay, like let's make sure I haven't missed anything here. Like this is all very much from like, so I've really taught myself well. But so I did my financial advisor qualification with the London Institute of Banking and Finance, but I didn't want to do financial advice. Like, I don't love the industry structure in terms of where they like charge people an ongoing percentage fee forever to basically like stick it in a fund. So I prefer to work on the education side of things where I just help people understand everything so they can just make informed decisions themselves about where they should be putting their money. And I think it's better because then people can make you just decide like, rather than it being this thing of like, okay, I don't really understand what someone's doing with it or how it works, and still having this kind of fear around it or this lack of knowledge or empowerment. So yeah, that's it in a short kind of nutshell. And yeah, and then I kind of made it into what is wealth because I thought it was a really good question, like what is wealth? And obviously I'm doing the kind of traditional financial wealth side of things with people, and that's really important. But there's this bigger question of like, okay, well, it's different for everyone. Like what the best assets for you to invest in might be different for everyone based on what you want from your life and things like that.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
it
There's that
sounds,
big story.
yeah, it sounds to me that location independence was like a really high value for you, and that's a big reason why you're you've pursued the path that you've pursued, and we couldn't relate more to that, obviously. So Ruth's in Malaysia right now, I'm in the Philippines, and Hannah is in Portugal. So it's nice that that kind of freedom is like a good reason why to like a good thing to design your life around if that's how you want to build your wealth, the location independent bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's just so much to unpack out of that. Yeah. Sorry, I'm
What
having
did you
like
want to
a
say?
brain.
What did you...
Just that you did
Where do we
years ago.
begin?
Okay, no, where do we begin? Right. So I think what I'm trying to say is that it is so investing is not that straightforward. It is so unique to everybody, depending on what
So
their reasons are.
individual.
But a lot of people think that there's just one way to wealth. And I just love how you encapsulate and have explained through your own story and journey that it isn't just one way of doing it.
I'd like to also say as well, like you started in property and we started in property, because for us, for our background, it was either do stocks and shares or property, and property was the less sounded less boring when you're in your early 20s. And so that was the reason why we went into property first. And I don't know if that was maybe something similar with you.
I think it was just like I'd lived in a house, I'd rented a house. I knew people had, it was just, and in the UK, I think I was always brought up quite risk averse. So it was just something that I understood. Um, so I just kind of went down that path with it. And I didn't, to be honest, I didn't really know what the other options were. I had spoke to financial advisors who spoke about managing my money for me, but I couldn't find someone that like cared about things being ethical, couldn't really explain it to me properly. And I was just like, oh, so then that's why I ended up teaching myself everything. And even with the property thing, I kind of, when I first started, I just have like a very basic single, like kind of single let to families, just like normal houses strategy. But I did look into the whole HMO thing or like commercial property and like kind of explored lots of the different avenues with it. And then I was like, actually, I'm just going to keep it really simple here. And kind of got to a point where I was like, oh, that's enough. Like, I'm not going to try and keep expanding or anything, which I think is also an interesting decision because it sounds like you guys kind of just kept going with it. And I maybe like tapped out a bit earlier in the process. I don't know. It'd be interesting for you to hear like how you went about that as well. But that was kind of my experience. I was like, got to a certain point. I was like, okay, I've got a couple properties here. Great, like making some passive income. And then I realized the stock market was a good option as well. Kind of did that bit of crypto. But yeah, it's kind of like looking at everything all together, I think, is what I work with people a lot on as well. Because I think sometimes well, people like obsessed with property and they're like
Yeah.
Yeah.
really evangelical about it. Or people are like, or you go to a financial advisor and they'll be like, property's dead. Or people be like, people don't make money in property anymore. And people are like these really extreme ends of the spectrum. I think people have their viewpoint on what works and are quite wed to it sometimes.
Yeah, that's so
Oh
true.
my gosh, that's so true. So, so true. I actually wanted to ask because you mentioned that you've been raised to be kind of risk averse. How were you raised to be risk averse? Was your family like entrepreneurs or what was their how was that passed to you, the risk averseness?
Yeah, like zero entrepreneur vibes. Like I'm still even me doing this now is still, I wouldn't say it was like naturally like I was always just like you kind of get told, get a job, get a house. And I was like interested in pursuing a career that I cared about and I was interested in, which is why I went into fashion. It wasn't ever like I'm gonna pick the best paying career, obviously, because I wouldn't pick fashion. But yeah, I think it was just, and I think just the lack of financial education as well, really, because you don't have these conversations. So I was always under this impression that the stock market was really risky and it was like gambling. It was only when I was older and was like consciously researching it that I was like, oh, it's actually our pensions are invested and this is the whole system works. And it kind of started to unravel from there. And I was like, oh, okay. And then with the property thing, I was like, oh, people do this leverage and they kind of and the actual property investors often do interest only mortgages and like I just didn't know anything basically, so I think that makes you quite
So
risk averse in a
did
way.
you
You're just like, okay,
self-learn all of that? Like how did you self-learn?
I don't even know because I'm like it's not like pre-internet, but it was pre kind of all these educational platforms, so it
But
was like books. I didn't watch YouTube videos, I didn't have a influencer giving me content. Like I think I just found random books. And I remember when I first, well, with property, I did try and like find someone, like a mentor, a guy, and it was actually him when I spoke to him. He had like 30 properties in Manchester or something and spoke to him about maybe selling some, buying some of his HMO portfolio. And he was like, oh, I'm selling them all because I just make loads of money in the stock market. I don't have to do anything. And I was like, oh, interesting. He was like, yeah, I made 25% last year. I was like, 25%? I was like, that's a lot. I'm going to look into this. And that was actually the catalyst for me, like maybe diversifying a bit more and learning more about that because he was kind of one of the first person that had just been really honest and been like, this is how much money I actually make with it. And I was like, oh, that's a lot. Like I should be looking into this more seriously. Um, yeah, so I think it was books. And I remember even when I first did my first like stock market portfolio and like maxed out my stocks and shares ISA, I just cobbled it together. I just like made it up. Like I knew enough to get in the game. Like I knew enough that this was safe and like I wanted to go down the index investing path, but I did some random stuff. Like I just picked all these a couple random funds and was like making up the geography and the percentages myself, which now I realize like I didn't really need to do. But I think sometimes it's you know enough to take action. I think that's where a lot of people I work with get stuck as well because they kind of maybe know they should be doing something, but then it's like quite scary to press the button on stuff, isn't it? When you're like, I don't know about you guys when you made that first investment, because you can't see the future and you can learn all the theory, but there's also this element of uncertainty of like you don't know exactly how everything's going to pan out.
Oh yeah, and I think there is an element of like just accept that you're probably going to mess up the first few times. Um, like especially with our first property, we made so many mistakes, and I think that's the best way to learn. But also, I think as humans, we overcomplicate everything, and actually, it's pretty simple. Like you said, you can do all the theory, but when you're actually doing it, you realize it's not as bad as you like anticipated. And I also think as well that a lot of these conversations are predominantly in male spaces. It's so nice to be able to see you and start to see more women to have these conversations. But I still find personally, I'm not having these conversations with certain friendship groups. It's only other entrepreneurial people or business owners or anyone who's actually actively investing and being quite forward with telling people like online that they're actually doing it. But in real
Mhm.
life, I don't find these people, they're not as, they're hiding under a rock. Would you say that would be the same? Like, would you think that's the same as well? Do you have friends that you can talk about investing at all?
I think when I started, I definitely didn't, and I was kind of the one teaching my friends. I think now I've kind of moved to Portugal. I have new friends here, and everyone is quite entrepreneurial and work for themselves. So I actually rent an office with some friends who they also kind of have their own businesses and run their own things. And we like our WhatsApp group's called the Money Makers because we're like really encouraging of like if someone signs a contract, we're like yes, like get it, and that's really nice. And kind of thinking about okay, where are we putting our money as well, and talking about investing, but this is very anecdotal, but I found that if I speak to a man and tell them what I do, they will quite often be like, they'll tell me their whole investing strategy and where they put their money. And they'll probably give me some advice and be like, I spoke to one guy and he's like, yeah, you should be buying gold. Like I've, been with one guy, he'd be like, you should be buying crypto. Or like I sat on the train the other day opposite a guy and we were just like got chatting for about an hour and he was telling me what his portfolio is and what he's done, like picked themes of industries. He's like, these are the three industries I've like been putting my money into. And I've just found that if that conversation with women that doesn't really happen, and maybe it isn't that also that they aren't investing, but sometimes I think it's that confidence as well to be like, this is what I'm doing with it, and like backing yourself with your strategy too. Like I found it really interesting that
Do
kind
you
of
think, do you think
difference.
it, do you think, I don't know, because I've tried to talk to other women about investing and it kind of feels like it's fallen on deaf ears. But do you personally think that women don't speak up enough about talking about what they invest in because it's either the lack of confidence or they're scared to if like something like was to happen then it makes them look shameful, whereas in men they're so ballsy and they are very happy to be able to talk about all of this, but I don't understand why women don't talk about it enough.
I do think we've just been
We're in the same
socialized.
way. Mhm.
Yeah. I think women aren't socialized to be kind of like aggressive about wanting to make more money. It's kind of like greedy or selfish or materialistic or whatever. Whereas I think men probably have been socialized like their role has been to provide, and like money is a part of that. Like I think
Mm.
not people don't say it in those words, but I think deep down like that you can't kind of get past the gender roles that we've had for generations. And if we think of it in context, I think our kind of age group and demographic, like we really are some of the first people. Like I know a lot of friends in my friendship group, we were kind of like a lot of the first bits of the generation to like go to university and get these corporate jobs and be able to even invest. And in the past, like investment platforms, well, I think we kind of forget as well. We've got so many investment platforms now. Actually, one of the things people ask me is like, what platform should I use? Because it's overwhelming. But in the past, it wasn't even an option for people unless you had like a certain amount of wealth or were in certain circles. So I think in this grand scheme of things, were really new. It was only 50 years ago that women could get their own like mortgages in their own name and accounts without a man co-signing it, which is insane. So I think it is just like that, those kind of patterns, to be honest, and there just hasn't. But I see a real appetite. Like I think women want to learn. They definitely like get. I think we've got to a point where people get they should be doing something and they want their money to be working harder for them. But like when what I found is like there's a bit of a gap between what you actually do.
That's true. Because like I've found when Becky and I first started investing, we did keep quite quiet. I think out of fear of judgment from other people. Especially with certain, there's a truth in also with you when you're in certain friendship groups that sometimes you're worried about changing that structure if you admit certain things about yourself. And I think it only comes with age that your confidence grows and you realize there are other people that you can talk about that other side of yourself. But when you're younger, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. And I think for me, because the money was tied up in a lot of grief. It was just really hard for me to talk about, so I didn't talk about it, and I just got on with it by myself. And I just didn't want to have those conversations because one, people can't even handle the topic of money, and two, people really can't handle the topic of grief. And it was just too much for me to even be able to really open up to people about because people are just sometimes a bit, like weird about it. And I didn't have when it's still a bit raw from losing someone. If people are like somewhat insensitive, which people have been, like kind of with the some questions that they'll ask about it. And if you're in a bit of a vulnerable space, it's just like too much is wrapped up in it. And I think sometimes I work with people who have these bigger amounts of cash, and it's because of someone's died or they've had it passed down to them, or they've just like been given a trust fund from a family member, or like all these different scenarios. But it can feel weird if it's kind of wrapped up in, or like a divorce, all these big life events, and sometimes like money is very entangled with all these emotions as well. So
I
you can
think,
be kind of
like you
rational.
said, there is a lot of responsibility that comes with it, and we have had a guest on our podcast before who has talked about having an inheritance, and like there's a lot of guilt that comes with it, especially if you are a trust fund baby or there's a level of feeling like you're privileged, but you don't know how to handle this responsibility, and people who aren't from that sort of background or have that sort of privilege don't understand how emotionally charged that is to handle that much money and make sure that it you do something with it.
Yeah, especially if you like we were talking about never had these conversations, don't have anyone in your circle. It's actually quite tough to, and it sounds it sounds nice, a nice problem to have, but it's still
It's still a
it
problem.
is, yeah, it's a problem to be. It's a pressure because you
Yeah,
don't want to mess it up. It's an enormous pressure, I think.
Yeah. But you talk about
I think that's the thing. Just because
yeah, sorry, Becky, come on.
So I was just going to say, just because it's just even though it's a problem, it that it doesn't discount, like just because you're privileged and you have your problems, or like you don't have to be like suffering famine or lack of home or anything. Like a problem is still a problem regardless, and it's still heavy. And I don't think anyone's individual problems, despite their circumstance, should be like disregarded or discounted. It's like who was it? It was there was a celebrity who was feeling really lonely and posted about it, and it was during lockdown. And I remember the comments being really aggressive and being like, "Oh, you must be so sad in your mansion." And it's like, well, that doesn't discount his own problems. That's really unfair for someone to kind of still cast the same sort of judgment on somebody else when their problems are like heavy just in a different way. Sorry, I
Yeah,
digress.
and I think the fear of judgment is a big thing as well, especially like with investing. People have lots of opinions, and I don't know if you've ever found that with property. Like I feel like there's so many opinions about it, and
Oh,
it can be a tough one to navigate somewhat ethically, and like there's lots of dilemmas around is it ethical at all? Like you could obviously argue, but it's just I think the whole money thing is such a big thing to try and navigate our economic system and do it with some integrity is like a pretty big challenge.
Yeah.
yeah.
We talk a lot about wealth, and not just about making income. But what does wealth actually mean to you?
Yeah, I think for me, a big part of it is being like the location independence thing for me is like my version of a wealthy life because I just love being where I want to be. And so that's been a big motivation for me. And for me, it's also like relationships, health, growth is really important to me. And I think money is this amazing resource to do different things in life. And I think like, from my experience of especially like losing a parent and seeing someone like at the end of their life, it just really puts everything into context of kind of like what's important and just using what you have to kind of build that life. So I'm like very keen on just using it to the fullest, like living life as much as I can. Doesn't mean I'm like going crazy like skydiving every day or something, but just like enjoy, like appreciating what you have and everything. And just I guess building a life really intentionally is important to me.
I was gonna say Becky and I really gravitated towards you because, like, long story short, we basically was sold the dream, like the from like your early 20s, just like gotta just hustle your way to the top and make a ton, like so much money, and it never ends. And we got to a realization was like, is this really making us happy? And actually, like, when is enough enough? And knowing like you're either following your own idea of what success and wealth is, or you're following someone else. And I think, especially when you're younger, it's so easy to be so heavily influenced, especially with like the social media era, of what wealth is meant to look like. And the way that you're defining it, or very much is, I could say, very similar in how we feel about what we want, we th believe wealth is. But it's just it's just very interesting to be able to hear you say, like, it just sounds very peaceful, your type of wealth, and I can very much relate to it without yeah, I think, but I do think like what am I trying to get to is like, did you ever get through a point where you went, oh my God, why am I working this hard to get to this point of this is what wealth really means to me?
I think I've done a lot of like growth kind of work in terms of myself and growing like a lot of growth in terms of being able to manage money and investments and things like that and also like live your life the way you want to do and make scary decisions and make like I moved to Portugal on my own. I didn't know anyone here. I didn't speak Portuguese. I'd never been here. I literally just packed up my stuff and moved. And like making those big life decisions, I think it takes quite a lot of I don't know, I think when you do live your life the way you want to live, it's actually you have to really like go for it and it's quite uncomfortable sometimes. But to be honest, like I'm in a bit of a I don't know, I want to say like hustle here, but I'm like, let's get it. Like I think it's taken me a long time as well with money to be like also comfortable with wanting more. And I think as a woman, I don't know, it depends how you're brought up, right? But I think we're socialized to be like, oh, like I can't ask for much and I don't want to be like really greedy. And with the whole entrepreneurial thing, like it's taken me a really long time to flip my mindset to be like, oh, let's like figure out how to make money and oh, you can make money on the internet now. Like that's cool. And like, I don't know, there's just so many opportunities. I'm actually finding it really exciting time. Like I want to double down on like, and I want to help people. And I can see like the more kind of I put myself out there, the more cool opportunities are coming in for me and the more people I get to work with and the more amazing women I get to help. So I'm like, let's go. Like I think you have different seasons of life, right? Like when I first moved
I
to
agree.
Portugal, I was like, I need to focus on building a life and a community and relationships and my health and whatever, and sometimes work or does it isn't as high up the ranking. And now I feel like I'm in a really stable place and like all the other pillars of my life are like rock solid right now. I'm like, cool, like work focus, let's go, because I'm in a really great position to be able to do that now.
This is how
You're like overflowing with your abundance now. You're in like your cup is full, that you're like your foundations are solid. So you're like, I'm so full to give to the world. And like, I think that is a great place to be. And building your wealth allows you to be like that, right? It gives you the space and breathing room to show up with like top energy, positive energy to actually do good, as opposed to giving, like having that desperate energy and just trying to
Well,
get, like, you're trying to fill your cup, aren't you? Just trying to
I'd
take
also
from
say
people. Whereas,
I'd
go ahead,
also
Ruth.
say on the flip side as well, it's allowed you to also prioritize that other part, which is slowing down to reflect, to then be able to go back into, okay, now I'm ready to go full force. But wealth is ultimately it gives you options to be able to choose to slow down and also to speed up on your own in your own seasons of life, because this is literally what happened with us with last year.
Yeah,
We slowed down so that we could go full force this year. But sometimes if you don't have the option, if you don't have um, any wealth backing you, we always say that it's a pillar to what you want to pursue in life as your career, whether it's a 9 to 5 job or if it's a business that you love, like being able to have assets or build your wealth alongside that really helps you to pivot or helps you to give you options to go, oh, I can slow down or I can grow faster if I want to.
Yeah, being a bit more knowing, yeah. I think a lot of it is financial security, isn't it? Of being like, okay, I've got backup. I can and
Mm,
I have wiggle room and I can make different choices. Um, is very like, yeah, a big thing that not everyone has. And I think that's why wealth looks different for everyone, like the level of freedoms it can afford you. But I always say like financial freedom is being able to say no, like being able to say no, I have enough like emergency fund to leave this relationship. Like, no, I've got enough money saved up that I can leave this job or I can use it as a runway to like do my own thing or get a new job. And I think that's what I'm really passionate about, like where that looks like. I work with people at lots of different ends of the kind of like financial spectrum in terms of how much they have and what goals they're working towards. But I think there is a general trajectory of like just kind of moving forward and focusing on financial stability, like focusing on building assets, whether that looks like, whether it looks like paying off debt or like savings or getting on the assets. Like there's it's I think it is a mindset of being like, okay, like I'm focusing my finances and moving forward in terms of like having more and more stability and more backup for myself.
yeah, like do you, I also find um with women, because you focus mainly on women, don't you? Or
Yeah.
exclusively on women. Um, why do you think that women are more focused on like creating the salary over and just ignore building their net worth? Because you talk a lot about net worth.
Hmm. I think people don't even know what net worth means. Like I wouldn't have used it's just also like not a phrase that is like you were saying, like people don't have these conversations and people don't even know that that should be a goal of like, oh, my goal is to build my net worth. And just if you're listening, like you probably do, like you probably are interested in this kind of thing and know, but your net worth is kind of the same as, okay, like I'm gonna pay off this credit card, that's building your net worth. Then you move on to savings, that's building your net worth. Then you move on to building assets, that's building your net worth. And it's like that zoomed out mindset, I guess. But I think you are just taught a lot for a lot of people, get a job, get the house, and then you just kind of adjust your lifestyle as you go. And it's not this thing of like, okay, let's put as much money in assets as we can because that's the way to buy back my time. I think that is a mentality that people don't even know is an option on the table because they're just like, oh, you just work until you retire. And so that's kind of how you execute all your financial strategy. Whereas if you're like, oh, there's actually another option, which is that I will build assets and wealth and I will be putting, either if you're someone with a lump sum or you're like, I will be putting £100 every month into something that's building my future and is getting my money working for me and growing. I think it's
Mm.
a mentality shift that people don't even sometimes know is an option because people don't talk about it as a part of their financial goals. But lots of people don't even have financial goals, to be honest. People just like vibing and just kind of like I think people have financial goals of being like, right, I'm going to save for like a deposit for a house or I'm going to save for a wedding or like the big milestones. But I think just being
They're like
like,
more the milestones that are like now rather than 10 years time, aren't they?
yeah, and just like these kind of vague milestones of like, I want to have 100K in assets or I want to have £1,000 cash flow from property portfolio or whatever. Like people, you kind of have to make those up yourself as well.
Mm. I do think as well, I don't know if you've noticed with your clients that do you think that women maybe don't think that like I do I think what I'm trying to say, that women, I do personally think women do think long term, but sometimes I think, are we set back because we go through, I mean, we're millennials, like we tend to go through like right now, some of us are going through the caregiving years, producing babies, or like that kind of takes a massive knockback on having your brain to even think about any of this stuff that you end up relying so heavily on your partner who could be a man or just saying like traditionally let's just say it's a man, and so then you'd never think about like considering your net worth as like an important factor at all because you're not given the mental capacity to be able to I just well, I'd like to know what if that's ever come up with your clients.
Yeah, I mean, just in general, I talk a lot about the gender wealth gap, and a lot of it does come down to the motherhood penalty is huge, but also caregiving in general. Like, I've had to take time off in the past, like with my dad at the end of his life, and then with my nan at the end of her life. So I'm very keen on people having that's why I care about people having like these financial options. And if people are looking at like, oh, okay, if I switch from saving to investing, that might end up them having like an extra 100K or what, it depends on how much they have, right? But and then I'm always looking at that being like that's years of your life that you can like do something with. And also, women get so penalized doing all these caregiving things that you need to be more aggressive and on it with your finances. You need to be more aggressive about getting your money working for you because you don't really have the option of probably having a life that is uninterrupted by caregiving, like traditionally. So you really have to be, yeah, like kind of on it with your finances because things like the pension gap is really scary because, and I always say this to women, I'm like, if you're having a baby with someone, yeah, I'll just use gendered language, but it kind of depends. Obviously, either one could be the one, but in general, it often tends to be the mother that ends up maybe staying home more or taking a step back in the career or going freelance. So they have the flexible work and then they're losing the pension from a company. And whereas traditionally the other partner who might be carrying on in the workforce, they're getting their pension. And then it has to be a conversation about the household wealth as well. I think not just like the income. I think maybe people are getting better at having the income conversation, but it's like, no, but what is the wealth conversation that's happening? And if you also take that step back from your career potentially, your lifetime income potential is going down because you're not going to be getting those promotions on those years. Like you're just taking such a massive hit. And I also think about your lifetime income potential is the biggest asset most people have as well. Like most people don't get given a ginormous trust fund. Like most people, the most money they will make in their life is from like their income over their lifetime. So thinking about that earning potential and that asset that you have, like if you have a baby and you take the time out or the flexible options you're probably more likely for that to take a massive hit. So that these conversations have to be part of it. And that's why people have to be thinking a bit more about wealth and assets and their pension and their financial stability, like beyond just what's coming in every month.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Becky and I've always said that women were made for investing, especially when it comes to the reproductive years, so that you can take a little bit of a mental step, no, a step for having to think about your child, but that by having investments there, it means then when if you are able to go back to work or you want to go back to work, like you've already investing in something alongside being a mother if you choose to, and that just kind of gives you a bit more peace of mind that you're not completely just relying on your partner to pick up the weight. A lot of our audience is property focused, but the stock market might feel really intimidating. If for someone who's never invested in the stock market, where would you say that they should start?
I teach and I use a strategy called index investing. So I think that if you are someone that has disposable income, you should learn about it. You should understand it. I think it's also really helpful to know how other assets work so you can compare it with property and maybe you can compare it with if you're looking at, okay, this is the return on the investment I could make from this deal and this is the return it's going to give me annually. Like you kind of want to be able to compare it to something else as well. So I think it's really that's a good place to start. I mean, typically the stock market's returned 8% on average every year for the last like 30 years. It's very up sometimes, very down sometimes. But I think the perk of it is that it's more accessible in terms of you can just sell it quickly, which you can't do
Yeah.
with property. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like understanding the pros and cons of different assets and how they might fit together as well. If you're someone who's doing property, it's like, actually, is there a place for something else potentially? And can it actually support the other things you want to do too? Because it has a bit of a different job and it works a bit differently. But essentially just buying little bits of companies and owning them. And companies, should be making money and making profits, and you get a bit of that. So it's obviously very different, but I think it's something that if you are a property investor, you should kind of understand, ideally, to be honest. I think it's a good to have that overall understanding of how things work.
Before we continue, here's a quick thought. Ever feel like there's just never enough time to focus on what really matters in your business? You don't have to do it all alone. As they say, a great team makes everything easier. That's why we've partnered with the Freedom Geek. Their talented Filipino VAs help us with tasks like admin and podcast editing, just like for this episode, giving us the freedom to focus on what really moves the needle. If you're looking to reclaim your time and to work smarter, then check out the Freedom Geek. All the details are in the show notes. Now let's get back to our conversation.
Yeah, and I think
So do you feel like asset allocation should be spread between those like stocks and shares alongside property, or will that just evolve over time, or should it kind of be like a spread focus?
I think it depends on the person, right? Because some people just don't want to do anything. They want to be really hands off. They'll just put all their money in stocks and shares. Some people might just want, if they're like, okay, actually, I don't want 100% of my net worth in property because it's completely inaccessible. And say if something happens and I want to take a couple of years off, or if whatever, like I have a void period and I need some cash, like maybe you might keep money in cash, but you might also be like, oh, I'd like it to be working for me, but I also want it to be a bit more accessible in terms of I can sell it quickly. So I think it just depends on the person and like your strategy. I would never say there's like people should have 25% in each thing. I mean, there are kind of portfolio theories of people being like, 25% property, 25% gold, 25% stocks, 25% cash. Or like there are those kind of things you can read about. I don't have one that I like subscribe to. I think it's really different on the person. But I think if you understand how everything works, then you can make an informed decision for you of being like, actually, I want to have 5-10% of my net worth in cash. I want to have 10% in this, and I want to have this much in this. And if you're zooming out, you might be like, oh, actually, I've got like 95% of my net worth in property. That's really hard for me to access. Maybe it should be a bit more in cash or a bit more in something else. And I think when you take those zoomed out perspectives, then you can make decisions for yourself as well, and looking at like as a
Yeah,
whole.
I think that's a really important message because, like you said, there's some people who are so dedicated to their asset class that they don't really consider diversifying it. And I think that's one thing I'd like people listening or watching this to take away is to really consider diversifying their asset classes. Get in touch and watch Hannah's content and also learn about all the different types of asset classes and not just put all your eggs in one basket, because I think as an investor that is a more risky strategy just to only put it in one. But like you said, having ETFs and funds and things where you can have multiple, be a part of buying multiple companies, that is spreading risk.
because
So yeah,
on
I
social
love
media,
what
you'll
you're
have
showing people.
on social media will have die-hard people who are like only stocks and shares or only property, and I'm like, that's the only way, you should only do this strategy. And you go, actually, no, that's quite risky. Like maybe think about diversifying. Like I think that's why it's so important to be able to plan with someone like Hannah who can guide you in what actually is going to work for you, like whether you need to be able to access cash in the next 5 years, whether you want to have it like only be able to access a portion of your cash when you're retired. There's like so many different avenues, and it really depends on like
Selling
what
a
it is that you
property
want
is
to do.
hard. It takes ages. If you want to see money out of your property like a lump sum, it's gonna take months. Like it's good to have liquid investments as well. It's really important to have liquid investments and your saving emergency funds. Oh, one question I did want to ask that is for somebody who is really into ethics and has morals and values, navigating ethical investing. What would be your like advice on that? Because personally, actually, when I came to figuring out how to invest in stocks and shares with ethically, I found it really difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is really hard. I kind of landed on, I knew I wanted to do this index investing strategy because it made sense to me. Um, but investing ethically was a non-negotiable for me. So then I've realized that you can get the ESG versions of those funds, which screen out maybe like 2% of the worst companies in the world. So it screens out some of oil, some like tobacco, some controversial weapons. It's not perfect, and you're kind of at the mercy of whatever their kind of screening requirements are. You don't get to make it up and pick. That's kind of the point, though, that you don't have to pick companies when you index invest. And I won't go into like so much about it right now because I think we might be here for a while, but I just think it's good to know the breadcrumbs of like what to look up, or you can come and do my free email course or whatever. But for me, I was like landed on, okay, I'm screening out some of them. It's not, is it perfect? Like, no, but it's something that matches like my risk tolerance, my need for diversification. And, but also I think it's important to do something to kind of indicate consumer demand. And there was a lot of research from on like the most kind of green thing people can do is change their pension funds, change their investments over to a slightly more ethical option. Like it was more effective than stopping flying and recycling and doing all these other things. They're like, actually, the highest impact you can have is switching your pension fund out of a kind of just Bobby Basic one into something more ethical. And they're all called different things. Some people call it ESG. Impact investing is more when people are actually picking the good companies that are really regenerative. But sometimes that's kind of relying on a fund manager picking the companies, which is like kind of, I did it for a while, but it just didn't feel quite right for me. So there are lots of different ways to do it. And I think you have to also kind of decide where your line is as well. And I'm like, for me, ESG index investing was like what felt right for me. Like I never would have done it without any kind of nod to the ethics, but equally that kind of felt like a good ground for me, what I was comfortable with the strategy, and it like matched my risk tolerance and all that kind of thing.
I was going to say, I read somewhere that there was a concern that sustainable investing was going to be so much more underperforming than like a regular S&P 500 type of investment. Um, but they actually mapped out over a longer period of time that it was more sustainable and it was very close to matched or exceeded. So I think if you're worrying about, well, this was my worry at the time, that choosing something that met ethics wasn't gonna perform actually ends up a lot of the time because it's a more sustainable investment, lasting longer and being a more sustainable investment in the long run. So if that was ever a fear for any listener out there, maybe I can try and dig up these stats, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're missing out because you chose to be an ethical investor.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be honest, mine has probably underperformed a little bit against the ones that are include everything, just because we're in times of uncertainty, war, so like oil's doing really well. Like probably loads of the defense companies and stocks that maybe are screened out are doing really well. So I think people might not want to do it because of that, and that's like a valid reason. But actually, yeah, I think get the facts on differences, and sometimes the difference is quite minimal. It's like not as much as you might think, and it kind of depends on the future. It just depends on if they're going to change laws and hopefully,
Yeah.
make it that green energy and things like that take off more. But yeah, I think it's a valid concern. I think do your research, but just so that's why I think it's such a personal thing. But for me, I was always like, yeah, that's fine. Like it's not a crazy, I don't think it's gonna be a crazy difference when you actually look into it. And it's like a small hit I'm willing to take. And also I kind of try and offset it by being really mindful of which platform I'm choosing, which fund fee I'm choosing, and like trying to gain back all the little percentage points on the other things if you're being really smart about it, so that it kind of allows for the buffer on the other side.
Yeah. I think I'd like to add as well is like if you're just starting as well into investing and you can also get into the habit of like analysis paralysis, where you then don't do anything, you take no action at all. But I think there's also sometimes it's just better to start and then pivot into, okay, this looks like a lot more ethical. I'm going to put my money there instead. I think it's yeah, just try and start instead of not doing anything at all. It's better that you're in the market and starting now than not starting.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like just, I'm of the opinion of if you learn up front and try and get it going, then you can just leave it as well. Like if you figure
Yeah.
out your strategy and you're like, okay, this makes sense to me, it isn't this really hands-on thing. Like you should, like I literally put mine in 2018 and I haven't really done anything. I'm not gonna like I'm like I just put it in the right thing up front
That's
and
the
now I'm like,
best
it's
way.
done. I don't have to
Yeah.
do anything. And it's grown loads. So I'm like, this is great. But yeah, I think it's not as also as hands-on as maybe people imagine. Like I would have thought, I don't know, sometimes you just don't know, do you, what you don't know? And sometimes there's perception is this graph checking thing that you have to do. But I think actually if you pick the right fund that's doing a lot behind the scenes for you, you can just kind of do the research up front, make sure you're comfortable and understand it, and then just leave it for the long run.
Yeah, that's so true. I have a few questions. We can carry on. I could keep asking so many questions, but I have just a few questions before we do wrap up because I
Yeah.
just would love to ask them. So, if someone listening feels behind financially, what would you say to her?
I think you probably have more time than you think. I work with people across lots of different ages and like people in their 50s, even if you're in your 60s, like you're probably hopefully going to live quite a long time. Like you still need to have your money working for you and probably in some way, like even in retirement. But I feel like something happens when people hit 40 as well. That's what I found. Like people I work with and hit 40, they're like, oh, like I feel like it's the point you're like, oh, retirement isn't this like really far off concept anymore. Like it's I can feel it approaching more. But I'm like, well, yeah, it would have been nice to know this stuff. I mean, like you sound like you guys were on it really young, and I'm like, yeah, I would have loved to have learned this stuff at school. But you just have to suck it up and be like, well, I can do what I can do now, and actually, I've probably still got a good couple decades of growth in front of me. And you just have to. There's a thing called the sunk cost fallacy, and I think you just have to block it out and don't allow yourself to indulge in like, oh, I wish I'd have started earlier, and it's so bad starting now. It's like you've probably got decades ahead of you. You just need to get on with it. And like
Yeah.
a lot of the things I hear as well is people are like, oh, I'm going to do it when I have more money. But I'm like, if you don't have a lot of money, you have to be really aggressive about the time in terms of like having it grow as long as possible for you. So you actually need to not be dilly-dallying. Like you need to get on with it. And then you can let time do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. Because say if you're making 8% a year, your money should be doubling every 9 years. So then your goal is like, I need to get as many of those 9 years chunks in as possible. And that's obviously not exactly how it works, but as a kind of way of thinking about it, I'm like, you need to be, okay, I need to let this grow then and let compounding do the job rather than me having to funnel loads in. So yeah, I think whenever you learn about it, you learn about it and you can be annoyed about it for a bit, but then you just got to get on with it.
Um,
Wait, let it go and just focus.
get on with it. We have one question that we always ask at the end of, we ask our guests at the end. Um, so the question is, honestly, the biggest thing I've learned is
And it doesn't have to be like specifically about money. It could be about
anything in
anything.
life,
God, that's a big one.
no
I know
pressure.
this isn't maybe like the one thing I say. This is what I said last night. Like this is a random thought that popped to my head yesterday because I was like, I do think a lot of life is just about making up silly little side quests and just like doing random things that you find fun. And I was like, I do think that is the point. Like I was thinking like I might just get up and go for like a drive at sunset because I can. I think it's just like you just make up random things that feel intriguing to you that you want to do. So I don't know if that's like the biggest thing I've ever learned, but I'm like, I don't know. I think you can just make a lot of stuff up and just be like, this is what I want to do. Like I literally just moved to Portugal. I was like, oh, I want to move to Portugal. I'm going to go. And obviously, like financial freedom is a huge part of like me being able to do that. But um, yeah, like you can probably do more than you think. And I also think people will like kind of talk about like adulting a lot in an eye roll kind of way. And I'm like, no, like we're an adult. We might have adult resources, we have adult possibilities. Like let's use everything to our full kind of scope and go for it.
Oh, I really like that.
I
It's such
love
a
that.
positive spin on like just being having like adult problems or just in general just being an adult. And I could see your face lighting up when you said all of that.
Yeah, I'm an adult. I can just do what I want. Like no one's telling me. Like I think it's scary because like no one's telling me what to do. Can someone please tell me what I should be doing? But also it's like, oh, I can just do whatever. Like I can literally just make up that I want to eat whatever I want for dinner. And like I don't know, I feel like sometimes you just don't give yourself that full autonomy.
It's like t taking taking responsibility that you have agency over your life.
Yeah, just make stuff up and do random things.
Thank you so much, Hannah.
I love
We've
that.
really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, I think it
I
went really fast.
generally I could ask you so much more, but I know that we'd be here for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
But where could people find you? Where's the best place to find you?
I am on Instagram a lot. Hannah What is Wealth, which HANNAH is how you spell my name. And then I have if you want to do learn about ESG index investing, I have a free 5-day email course. If you go to whatiswealth.io/invest, and it's like quite a good explanation of the strategy, in my opinion. Um, and that's probably the best place. I'm Hannah Mayfield on LinkedIn. I've started becoming a bit of a LinkedIn hun as well, but not as consistently. But I am on there. It's quite nice sometimes to have familiar faces there. So yeah.
Yeah, we're all for
Wonderful.
link.
We'll put them all in the description down below for you to connect with Hannah and learn for amazing nuggets of wisdom. But yeah, we loved this conversation so much today, and just a big reminder for everyone listening or watching that you don't need to just zone in on one asset class, but the important thing is to have clarity, know how to allocate, and build your life with intention. I think is the greatest thing that we all can connect with here. So thanks so much for being a guest again, Hannah.
Yeah, it's a good
Thank you.
summary. Thanks so much for having me.
Bye.
We'll talk again soon. Bye.